Hello and thanks for joining me. Let's chat for a bit about Sapiens, Our Species, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. I have been wanting to get to this book since last year. I read Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari last year and really enjoyed it. And then as it happened last fall, I was at a charity bazaar, and they had some used books for sale, and I came across this UK paperback edition of Sapiens, and so I decided 2018 was going to be my year to get this read. So yeah, it fit my 2018 priority reading criteria, though, of history. It was one of my history selections, and then after reading it, though, I did, discover that it also really fit the reading theme I had this year of identity, because this is all about who we are as a species, and who we are as a species is part of who we are individually, right? As part of our identity. So it was really interesting on two different levels, on the historical level as well as the identity level. But this particular book, Sapiens, originally published in Israel in Hebrew in 2011, and then this edition that I read, like I mentioned, is a UK edition published in 2014 and translated by the author into English. And so what it's about is a history of our species, just sort of like the title, the subtitle here describes. So what I kind of thought I would do is kind of go through the table of contents, because that will really describe what the book is about. But there is a little blurb on the back that I think is pretty cool. The little thumbprint here. It says, 100,000 years ago, at least 6 human species inhabited the earth. Today, there's just one, us. Homo sapiens. So this book starts back in deep time, in our evolution, and proceeds all the way up to the present day, and even takes a little bit of a peek into what our future might be. That idea of our future was further explored in the book Homo Deus, his second book, which I read first. So, but there's touches on it here too. But yeah, so just what the different parts are. There are 4 different parts to this book. Excuse me. Part 1 is called the cognitive revolution, and this part really concerns when we became Homo sapiens. When we started to be able to think differently and think abstractly. This really involved around being able to create fictions. So that fiction tie-in, reading in a way tie-in, because this is still that's still in play when we're reading modern fiction today. The storytelling, but through this storytelling, we were able to change the way we thought, and also change the way we cooperate, and thereby expand our ability to both discover new technologies, as well as share technology with each other, and create these bigger cooperative groups than we were able to as small sort of bands of primates. So that's part 1. Part 2 is the agricultural revolution. So this is when domestication of plants and animals allowed for us to build cities. Again, our ever sort of widening network of people that we're able to cooperate with through, again, storytelling, because the way that these empires and these cities were able to develop, and these more complex cultures were able to develop, was the stories they told each other and the things that they agreed on to be truths. So I thought that was cool. Then part 3 is the unification of humankind. This is the invention of things like money, trade networks, empires. This is all put, united people, religions. And so these ideas, these sort of abstract ideas of things like religion, one example he uses in this book is Islam, where Islam was a set of ideas where it was able to cross lots of different cultures, but yet these different people that had nothing else in common, both all embraced this story of Islam, and so they had that in common. So that was unifying, something that unified them. Then part 4 is the scientific revolution. This was real cool because this was the discovery of ignorance. I had never really thought of the scientific revolution like this, but before the scientific revolution came along, humans as a whole did not think of holes in their knowledge. They had certain truths, like the king is right. So whatever the king says is true, or my religion is correct. So whatever my religion says is true. But as this broke down in Europe anyway, the beginning of the scientific revolution, that questioning, that admitting, that we don't have the truth, that there's something unknown that can make our lives better. The exploration of technology, for example, it was a new thing, and that scientific revolution as sort of continuing on to the present day, and then sort of the afterword of this is our future, and how through science and through technology we might be able to change our species, be self-directed evolution. So yeah, that's the main parts of the book. And then what I thought I would do, because there's this timelines. I'm not going to read the whole timeline, because literally this timeline starts at 3.5 billion years ago, with the matter and energy appearing in the universe, and then the formation of Earth, etc. What I thought I would do is start about 13,000 years ago, because that's when Homo sapiens became the last surviving human species. The extinction of Homo floresiensis happened about 13,000 years ago, which left us as the only human species left. And then about 12,000 years ago was the agricultural revolution, the domestication of plants and animals, like I mentioned. This allowed for permanent settlements, cities, and then eventually towns, villages, cities, etc. Then about 5,000 years ago, the first kingdoms, the first script, writing, and money, as well as polytheistic religions. And then about 4,250 years ago, the first empire, the Akkadian Empire of Sargon. And then 2,500 years ago, the invention of coinage, money, physical money, a universal money. That this part was really interesting in the book, because this talked about how money, like coins, even though it spread, like Roman coins and other types of coins spread around the world, because they had, it's strictly a construction, a social construction. It's a cultural construction that this coin has value, and it has value because of whatever's stamped on it. So whatever government or whatever entity stamped on it, that people will accept that as having value above just itself as an object. So that sort of abstraction of money, that happened around 2,500 years ago. And then the Persian Empire, a universal political order, and then Buddhism in India, which was this universal truth which united, a lot of different people under this idea of Buddhism. 2,000 years ago, the Han Empire of China, the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean, as well as the birth of Christianity. And then 1,400 years ago, Islam, again, like I mentioned, this empire that, or this idea that spread from its origin and completely transcended its origin and became something entirely different among many cultures of the world. To this day. And then around 500 years ago only, the scientific revolution, where humankind admits its ignorance and begins to acquire unprecedented power. Europeans begin to conquer America and the oceans. The entire planet becomes a single historical arena. And the rise of capitalism. So the scientific revolution has been a true, revolution. Has really changed us in many, many, many ways. Then about 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution, still going on in parts of the world. Family and community are replaced by the state and market. Massive extinction of plants and animals. And then the present day, humans transcend the boundaries of planet Earth. Nuclear weapons threaten the survival of humankind. Organisms are increasingly shaped by intelligent design rather than natural selection. And then the future, can we design our own future because of with our biological and technological knowledge? We shall see. So yeah, that's sort of what the book is about. This was such an easy read, though. This looks like it's quite a chunker. These are all notes starting here, but yeah, it looks like it's, and it is. It's a lot to read, but to me it went really, really fast because he's such an engaging writer. He takes this kind of information that could become really academic and really difficult to get through very easily, and yet condenses it down and makes it very relatable, I think. So it's just, to me, it was an enjoyable read, and I learned a lot from it. So just some thoughts I took away from it, though. This idea of fiction as power. I had never really thought of this in these terms, I don't think exactly like this, where the ability to tell stories, he describes it here, sort of how we differ from other animals, because all animals can communicate. You know, they have their own methods of communication. But Homo sapiens seems to have come up with a different way of communicating, which was creating a fiction, actually, that could bind people together, so that my little small tribal group started to be aware and take into account others. And, you know, maybe they share my story, maybe they don't. But this sort of story was a cohesive way to get, because naturally we would be somewhat like chimpanzees. We would our original origins, we would only be able to cooperate with a very small, relatively small social group. I think he says in here something like the maximum is around 100 to 150. But, you know, now we can cooperate actually with thousands of people. If you work for a corporation, for example, that's thousands of people that you're all cooperating in some, because you're all sort of ascribed to the same narrative. You're ascribed to the same fiction. The same thing with maybe nation states like the U.S., the United States. You know, we have our national myths, we have our national stories, and this is what binds us as people. So yeah, I thought that was really super cool. The other thing was gossip as power. How gossip, this sort of small talk, you know, I think I've discounted small talk as being, you know, irrelevant, but small talk is really how, what started the basis. The theory goes in this book, that's presented in this book, that started the basis of our cognitive revolution. This sort of small talk that you do with people, because this is how you interact with people, and it's a very important, has been a very important social function for us, evolutionarily speaking. So I think maybe I've discounted gossip and celebrity gossip and things like this. This is all how we share information. It might seem irrelevant, but it's sort of a social bonding that's going on there in this sort of idle small talk and gossip. And, you know, finally, before I run out of time, this idea of you know, the scientific revolution, admitting to ignorance, and I'd never really thought of it, I don't think, before, how different, and it's explained much better than I can explain it in this brief chat in this book, how, you know, before the scientific revolution, how it wasn't, you know, the truth. Things weren't questioned. Like, for example, the Earth-centered universe where the sun revolves around the Earth. That was not questioned for centuries and centuries. And when it was questioned, it was actually quite radical to say that we didn't know the truth that we didn't have the truth about the sun. And just getting comfortable with humankind, getting comfortable with the unknown, and getting comfortable with, you know, embracing, you know, we don't know the answer to that. That was a revolution. And so that was really explained really well in this book, and I enjoyed that part very much. So yeah, and then I always sort of like this futurism books. This book doesn't go into the futurism so much of maybe where our species is heading as Homo Deus did, but it does touch on it a bit, and it was kind of interesting to read that in light of having read, you know, our past. So I thought that was interesting as well. And then finally, you know, if you saw the chat I did recently on by desert, steppe, and ocean, which was a book about the settlement of Eurasia and how Eurasia evolved into being, you know, recognizable with the different cultures where they are and how they are. So this book was kind of really cool to read following that book, just because it was sort of along the same themes of this growth and change and movement of humans and the interaction and exchange of information and technology, and how we've gone from being small little bands of 50 or so people to over the millennia to being able to have this worldwide community now on social media and you know, the world that we live in now, much more interconnected than we've ever seen in our history. So I think I will stop the chat with that. My next read, I explained it on the last video. I am almost finished with For 2,000 Years. I have less than an hour to go to finish that book, and I will have a chat on that coming up very soon. Following that, I will be reading Moby Dick as Philosophy, so a book about a book, which was something that I wanted to get to this year. So that'll be coming up too in the very near future. So until then, take care. Bye.